So what we're looking at is a picture of a teenager who is presenting her vision of her ideal downtown civic area. And when I referred to the civic area before, this is a project we did 11 years earlier on the other end of the civic area. So it's, these things are very long-term projects. So this was a photo from 11 years ago, and she's using different found objects to create her vision. And so they're very colorful. You've got different foam blocks, you have silk flowers, you have plastic animals and cellophane. And this concept is actually developed by an urban planner out of California named James Rojas. And this is James's Place It activity, which we have used countless times in terms of eliciting from all ages their vision of what they want to build.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Mara Mintzer from Growing Up Boulder in Boulder, Colorado. And this is the first episode of season 11. Yay! First episode of 2026. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Before we get into this episode, I just want to say if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, super easy to do if you're here on YouTube. Just click on the join button right down below. You do get early access to all of my video content here on YouTube. You can also leave a YouTube super thanks right here. There's also a button down below where you can do that. Otherwise, head on over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons do get early and ad-free access, once again, to all my video content. Okay, let's get right to it with Mara. Mara, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. It's such a pleasure having you.
Well, it's so fun to be here with you, John. And, I've been seeing your work for so many years, and so it's beautiful to be able to connect.
Yes. Likewise, yes. This has been a long time coming. I, of course, am very dear friends with Darcy Kitching, and you two have worked together in the past. And, that's when I first heard of Growing Up Boulder. And we're going to be talking about that initiative in just a little moment. But I think, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you might have actually been profiled, the program might have been profiled in Tim Gill's book. Is that correct?
Yes, it was, exactly. And I love his book. I actually refer to it frequently.
Yeah. And Tim Gill has been a past guest on the podcast a couple times over, and he was gracious enough to serve as he is an Active Towns ambassador. He actually allowed me to stay in his place. I was able to house sit his place there in London and keep the plants watered during vacation the last summer back in 2024. So that was a good time. Mara, what I love doing is having my guests just take about 30 seconds to introduce themselves. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Mara Mintzer, and I am a co-founder and executive director of Growing Up Boulder, which is a nonprofit in Boulder, Colorado, centered around helping young people thrive through youth civic engagement. And my career has been dedicated to serving children and youth, and particularly centering the needs of underserved children and youth. And I've done that in New York City and in California, and then a few stints living abroad as well. So it's such a pleasure to be able to share what we're learning. We say Boulder is our learning laboratory, but we're also always thinking about what lessons have we learned that can be useful for other communities beyond where we live.
Fantastic. And I've got your website pulled up here on the screen. And why don't you take us back a little bit? What is your background? How did you get interested and engaged in all of this?
Yeah, so I come from a family of people who have really dedicated their own lives to serving children and youth. Both my mother and father worked in the field of child welfare. My grandmother was a preschool director during the WPA in the 1940s. And so really, this is just sort of in my blood. And started my career in New York City, creating some of the first universal pre-K programs that was just starting out then. And then when I went to graduate school for organizational psychology, I really wanted to help nonprofits become more functional, more efficient. But I ended up actually working in city government after that and supporting families in an under-resourced community in California. And we actually started what's called a community school, where we put all different support services for and by families living in that community. So, for instance, the parents needed clothing at low cost. So they created a clothing closet that they ran that they could then use to serve their peers. And so all of my work really has centered around this. How do we in the background support so that families in our community can really lead as they have the skills to do?
Yeah, yeah. And I think inherent in this concept, and we're going to be talking a little bit more deeply about exactly what Growing Up Boulder is doing and means, but inherent to this is some of the themes that Tim Gill and I were talking about with his book, Urban Playground, when we had him on. And then I also talked about with Lenore Skenazy with the Let Grow program. And of course, she wrote the book, really looking at free range kids in this concept, is that we don't give kids enough credit for the fact that they can provide feedback to us adults, as well as they can probably get out and do more stuff on their own. Talk a little bit about that.
We so underestimate young people. They don't have to have any specialized knowledge, because their specialized knowledge is what it is like to be a young person today in this day and age, and all the different things that they face and interact with. And really, we often think too, it can only be teenagers that we listen to, but we actually can observe the very young children and how they use a space. They don't even have to be verbal for us to get cues from them about what is working and what isn't working for them. And as well as actually asking their caregivers. So we really do engage children from very, very young all the way through 18. And just to make that a little more concrete, one of the things we did is we were working with the city of Boulder on their master plan for transportation. And so what we did was we strapped GoPros on the heads of 2 and 3-year-olds. And with their preschool teachers, they practiced crossing the street, using the sidewalks, trying to go to a favorite location. Well, the images we got from their view at a very small height, and also just the observations of the teachers who were trained in a Reggio Emilia philosophy, which means they're really child-centered and they're really writing down what the kids say. We were able to use that. And then that actually fed into the Vision Zero plan for our transportation master plan in Boulder.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so interesting how all of these things intersect. You talked about there's transportation. I just finished an interview last week with somebody who's doing work with parks and that connection to children and parks. And then of course we were talking about Tim Gill and his work with Urban Playground with his book, and he's talking about fighting for family-friendly places. And really, and here, of course, is his book, Urban Playground, which you referenced earlier, is that we've sort of infantilized children so much to the point where it's as if, they're not at all functioning and contributing to our society until they're 21 or something. I'm exaggerating.
And also, yes, absolutely. And there's also this view that they're not capable of so much. And then they end up not being capable because we assume they're not capable. In fact, if we give them, and as Lenore Skenazy talked about, and also Tim Gill, there is actually, if we allow them more independent mobility, if we create these communities that they can get around on their own, that is what they want to do. And developmentally, that is what they will do. And so I always think about this. When my own child was little, I went to the library and I looked at these books, and they were from the 1970s. And it was like, your child at 3, your child at 4. And each year they described them. Well, the book written in, I think, 1975 said, your 5-year-old should be able to walk 4 blocks to the corner store, buy milk, and walk back on her own. And we're not allowing children to do that now. So, how do we create communities that allow for that? And also, how do we support parents, even the parents who want to do that, to allow their kids to do it?
That is a really, really good point. And I'm going to pull up Lenore Skenazy's episode here as well. Of course, she is infamous for being categorized as the world's worst mom or America's worst mom because she allowed her child to use public transit there in New York, in Manhattan, to get home, something that the kid wanted to do, had been preparing to do, and then afterwards he felt this overwhelming sense of self-efficacy, and and it's just like the growth of, she just like was like, oh yeah, he, this is 20 years ago, but he's like, he just blossomed as a youngster, and that gave him so much self-confidence too moving forward. So we've really, I use the word infantilized, we've really created situations where we're not allowing children to, walk to places. It used to be that, the majority, if not, not quite the majority of kids would get to school by walking and biking. We had more neighborhood schools. It was safer for them to be able to get to school. And now I think as recently as what, the 1960s or 70s, it was still somewhere around 40% of kids getting to school by walking or biking. And now it's, like in the single digits or teens in most schools and most areas. We all can't live in Boulder that has a network of off-street network of pathways that connect many of the schools. But it's a real challenge when, we kind of, keep children in a bubble and assume that they cannot do anything and they don't even have opinions.
Absolutely. It's so problematic. And, there's so much research on the benefit for the children of being together without adults constantly chaperoning. And then also on the adults feeling less stressed out. If when I was visiting a friend in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, she was able to just stay at her house, and we were able to have a nice cup of tea while her teenagers got everywhere they needed by biking and public transit. And the other thing I always think about is these things are possible. I think often, because we don't see it as often around us, we think it's not possible. But when I was in Tokyo, I saw school children of 8 and 9 taking the subway or the metro by themselves all the time, no problem. And all the adults were there keeping an eye out for them as well.
It's really, really interesting too, and I'm glad you brought up those 2 cities in particular, because of course Tokyo is one of the largest cities that we have, major metropolitan city, but it is a culture that embraces the concept of, yeah, young children should be able to venture out and do things, and they are encouraged to do so. Now, they don't do so out on their bigger streets that they have, because they do have boulevards and they do have, car choked areas of the city, but they do have a network of very, very narrow, slow street environments where many of the children will walk on to be able to get down to the corner store. And you mentioned using transit. They're taught how to use transit very early on. You referenced Rotterdam, and that's a perfect city to reference, because it was destroyed in World War II and built back up based on a North American car-first model. And so for the first few decades after World War II, they became the least Dutch city of all Dutch cities, because they just had fast-moving traffic everywhere, wide boulevards, modernist high rises everywhere. And after a few decades, they're like, why is this city so dead? And they realized what mistake they did. So the past 2 to 3 decades, they've been trying to fix what was damaged. And it's just been amazing seeing that transformation of Rotterdam. And so I like to point to Rotterdam as a great active towns example of a place that was car-centric and realized they made a mistake, and they're starting to reverse that trend. And to your point, we can fix this.
Exactly. Yeah, and what I think sometimes we miss is examples of what's possible, right? We often get stuck in, well, I haven't seen that before, or I can't imagine it. And so there's a little mini documentary I love, The Nature of Cities, which shows these beautiful pathways that show surprise around a corner. They're very green. They're in dense areas, but they integrate nature into it. They make it playful. And I think we need more short films that show these sorts of things of what's possible to inspire people and to build the future that we want instead of just accepting how we are right now.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, tell me more about that little documentary. Is that something that might be available out on YouTube?
Yes, it's on YouTube. I mean, it's a little bit dated when you watch. It's very grainy, but it's really great. It's only 30 minutes long. The Nature of Cities, and for me, it really was inspiring and made me think about what do I want my community to be like? How do we create more pedestrian-friendly places, remove cars, create more friction for cars, which I know I've also learned that's not popular around the world. I've been participating in the webinars that Global Designing Cities Initiative has been hosting. And they've been hosting, yeah, they're great, a whole series of webinars all around active transit for children and youth. And in that, though, one of my takeaways is, no matter where you are, there are going to be people who get concerned about changing the way we do transportation. And so how do we still, while we it's important to include different people's voices, but how do we not let that stop progress?
Yeah, fantastic.
Isn't that
Well,
beautiful?
I found that documentary. So, folks, have no fear. I will include the link to this in the show notes below for this. And I do want to play a different video clip because I think I think it would be fun to see how local news has actually covered your work. And this is I think it's the local ABC affiliate. Is that what it is? Yeah, it is. It's Denver 7, the local Denver 7, the local ABC affiliate. Let's turn the volume up on this, and it's not very long. It'll give our voices a little bit of a break, and how long ago was this?
This just happened in May of this
Oh,
year. So
perfect.
we're in
Okay.
December of 2025. So this is all very fresh.
Very fresh. Okay, let's play this.
For 16 years, Boulder nonprofit Growing Up Boulder has been making an impact on young people and elevating their voices to local government.
In fact, ideas from youth have been included in a few master plans from the city, but the nonprofit says there's a lot more work still to do.
Denver 7's Colin Riley met with the group to learn how they plan to get Boulder designated as a child-friendly city.
We're really excited about all the work that we've participated in and the solutions that we've come up with.
When it comes to city planning, why does it matter what kids have to say?
Kids are actually current citizens, not just future citizens. They are experiencing the city, they are experiencing all of the programs and services we offer, and they have a right to help shape that.
Mara Mintzer, co-founder of Growing Up Boulder, partnered with youth, parents, and the city to create what's called the State of the Child Report. This 75-page report is a situation analysis. It's feedback from the community, what's working in young people's lives and what needs to be improved.
City government especially is so much closer than people realize, especially to youth.
Boulder kids like Ryler Haransky formed the Child Friendly City Youth Council, a group dedicated to creating and implementing a youth action plan that aims to get Boulder designated as a child-friendly city by UNICEF. This global program helps cities prioritize the rights and well-being of children. The Youth Council presented their plan to City Council Council last week after compiling data and feedback from 1,400 youth and adults, 17 city departments, and 48 community organizations, focusing on people who don't often have their voices heard.
70% of the children, youth, and families we heard from are from historically marginalized groups.
The study found 3 key areas of concern: bullying, feeling safe in public, and having a youth voice heard in city decision-making.
We decided on the third one because we thought that one could actually address more than having your voices heard.
It turns out the kids have plenty to say and plenty of ideas.
For bullying, we came up with a new curriculum for bullying that would be implemented in schools that's created by students.
Over the summer months, these kids and many others will refine their action plan and begin to implement their ideas into future city plans. When they're ready, they'll apply to UNICEF to be designated a child-friendly city. But even if they get that recognition for their work, it doesn't stop there.
We're never done engaging our community and helping create our community.
In Boulder,
There's still a need to always hear from young people.
Colin Riley for Denver 7.
Love it, love it. This is fantastic. Was this one of the first times that you were the program was profiled at this level on local news?
We've actually been profiled a number of times on and off throughout the years. We've been around for almost 17 years now.
Right, yeah.
Yes, we started at the University of Colorado Boulder in their architecture and planning department. And then we left to become a nonprofit about 5 years ago. So it's funny, we go in ebbs and flows. When I did a TEDx talk in 2017, it was picked up on the TED homepage. So then that also catapulted us into the international scene, which was really exciting to be able to share what we're doing and to learn from others as well.
Yeah, and we'll include that link, your TEDx talk as well. It's kind of running in the background right now. How cool is that you got to do a TED talk?
It was amazing. It was such an experience, and people have asked me would I want to do one again, and I said it was such hard work. It was just if I was walking to breakfast, I would be rehearsing it. But it was so worth it because to be able to share our message with a broader audience, it's been great. And I've heard from cities around the world and all the different continents that people have used this as a jumping off point for their communities to talk about being child-friendly communities. So that's thrilling.
Yeah. And you've heard me give my, sort of presentation before of the Active Towns culture, creating a culture of activity presentation, but that's an hour-long presentation or 30 to 40 minutes. But that concept of being able to distill that into a nice, tight, rehearsed package of a TED Talk, that is so freaking cool. So yeah, kudos to you. Our mutual good friend, Darcy Kitching, has done something similar to that and talked about her experience. But I want to pop back over to your website and look a little bit more deeply into what the organization is doing and has it evolved over the 17 years? So walk us through the mission, the vision, and the work that you're actually doing in Boulder and whether that has, evolved over time.
Absolutely. So our mission is to center young people's rights, voices, and agency to advance equitable and sustainable communities for all. And our vision is to cultivate vibrant communities where all young people thrive. And, we really have evolved over time. So if you go back to the very beginning of Growing Up Boulder, what we were doing was, and it was a group of people, it was myself, it was some professors, Willem van Vliet and Louise Chawla in the environmental design program. It also architecture and planning, depending upon what year you're talking about. And it was the local school district as well as the city of Boulder. And David Driscoll was then the head of city planning in the city of Boulder. And we came together and said, look, they had tried to do child-friendly cities in Denver, Colorado, with then Mayor Hickenlooper. And I had never heard of child-friendly cities. So I said, what is this thing? Well, what it is And what it was is there is a treaty, which is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, that outlines human rights for anyone under the age of 18. And there are communities all over the world that operationalize that to make their cities more child friendly. But in the US, we hadn't adopted that model yet. At the national level, each UNICEF office is its own independent NGO. And so we said, well, we're going to do our best to create what that might look like in the United States. And some of those same people created a white paper on the structure in the US. And that's what Growing Up Boulder really was our grassroots attempt at making our city child friendly. Just as an addendum, in 2020, the United States started doing child-friendly cities through UNICEF USA, and Growing Up Boulder and the city of Boulder started doing it in 2023 officially. But in the meantime, in all of that time period, what we were doing is pairing up different real city projects that were happening, like the redesign of a park or a transportation master plan, and then going out to different communities of youth, hearing from them, and then making sure that the adults and the youth were having a dialogue and that the adults could use the input they heard from the youth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we can see, some of the work is outlined here on the website, and we've got folks that you can click on these and learn more about this. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was to respond to some of the more recent trends. You've been at this long enough, 16, 17 years, as you've mentioned. You've been able to see a lot of change in the environment of what it means to grow up. We've referenced Lenore Skenazy a couple of times, and the Let Grow organization that she formed along with Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan, of course, is the author of the book Anxious Generation, and there's a big push to try to do what we can to break the addiction of screens, especially handheld devices with children, because of what we're discovering is the potential negative impacts of that screen time. Can you reflect a little bit about how you all as an organization and you doing work in this area, because that is something that really evolved and changed a lot over those 16, 17 years.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I've learned is we are doing, at the root of our work, it is similar throughout this whole time. It's really centering the needs of children and youth. But how we describe it and some of the details of it shift over time. And so, for example, Jonathan Haidt's book is perfect. Actually, we used it as the basis of an intergenerational dialogue we did between youth and adults around what their perceptions were around technology and the pros and the cons. But the other piece is this nature everywhere concept has really taken off in some of the places that I work. So the National League of Cities has partnered with the Children in Nature Network to do this Nature Everywhere project of having nature-filled cities for young people in 100 cities across the U.S. And they've achieved that. And Boulder is one of those cities. Now, we were already doing this work, but it kind of, when I see the opportunity arise, then we align it and we use some of the same terminology. We have kids giving their input to everything around nature. You could see it that top one was about actually creating climate resilient schoolyards. We just worked on that this past fall, and the kids are actually going to start digging and planting some of their proposed interventions this spring. But yeah, we just have a whole host of ways that we're addressing climate change and climate anxiety by having kids take action, because the research shows that taking action matters. But also, as Jonathan Haidt talks about, there's so many benefits emotionally, socially, physically, intellectually for kids spending time in nature and off screens.
Yeah, and off screens. Yeah, exactly. And like IRL, in real life, being able to get out. It's not a virtual life. The irony, of course, is that I'm a YouTube content creator, but it's like, yeah, I want to encourage you to stop watching and go out and experience life. To channel my good friend Ryan Van Duzer there in Boulder, he's the get out there guy. He's like, okay, watch my videos, get inspired, then go out and do something. And so, yeah, this nature connection. Of course, Richard Louv, wrote the book and really coined the term nature deficit disorder, and talked about the fact that kids are experiencing a life that doesn't have that richness of that nature connection. And Tim Gill and I had talked a little bit about this concept of re-engaging kids in nature play and adventure play, and not having these sterile environments of playgrounds that are all these plastic things, and it's overly programmed and it's overly controlled, and we're worried about them maybe tripping and falling, or trying to balance on that log in the creek bed. And it's like we're not allowing kids to be kids and develop. This is key to developmental things, is working on everything from balance to proprioceptive skills and all these other types of things. And so I was absolutely delighted to see that you had that nature connection there as well. And Boulder, what the perfect place, because you're surrounded by nature. The essence of how Boulder became Boulder is very much a close connection to the outdoors and nature itself.
Absolutely. And I just have so many, you got me excited. There's so many things to add here. So there's a group of us who we're from different city agencies, county agencies, nonprofits, and we started a group called Kinship, where sometimes we just get together to talk about our vision for how to have every child have access to nature. And we think about the vision, and then we try and figure out how to actually do it, because sometimes our own organizations can get in the way because of red tape. Well, we really have achieved a lot of what we've set out to do. There are maybe 10 different sites that we've been working on with our partners at the city this year to do exactly what you were just describing, to really create those nature-filled spaces. And the results have been fantastic. And so just to give you an example, there's an area called the Civic Area in downtown Boulder where our farmers market is. And there are a number of problems with the area right now. One is that it is often used for unsocial behaviors. So a lot of open air drug use, a lot of sort of verbal harassment. And so one of the things that reintroducing nature play to that area has done was it's cut down by 50% on social behaviors. We have kids and families of all ages coming out to use it. And the other observation has been that the parents are not on their phones the way they have been. They are actually engaging with their children. They're talking to other parents while the kids do free play. And this playground or play space was much, much cheaper to build. It was $14,000 of all recycled, repurposed trees from that Boulder had cut down because they couldn't use them anymore, versus a prefab playground. And it is getting rave reviews. And so we're doing that throughout the entire community all over. So it's very exciting.
No, it really is very exciting, and I shot some video of that, and so I'll try to edit that in. I'll try to drop those images in the video in, and it's really cool because again, it's sort of nature based. It's like some logs that have been cut and allowed, and people are the kids are able to scramble up them, and that level of engagement. And it's sort of like the whole Jane Jacobs thing of eyes on the street. And if you're able to get more families engaged and kids playing in that area, you can start to transform that area away from a scary, dangerous place. And it's almost, paradoxical that is the way to do it, to make it happen. But yes, let's make it a place for people and a place for families, and that will help us deal with a very, very complicated problem, which is, of course, dealing with the unhoused and some of the the drug addiction and mental illness challenges that are inherent in all of that. I want to go back to the Child Friendly Cities initiative and talk a little bit about this concept of what it really means to be a child-friendly city. I mean, I have my Active Towns take on it, which is very much rooted in the Dutch experience and how the Dutch are creating an all ages and abilities environment where it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, you can get around through active mobility. You can walk, you can bike, you can use transit, you can drive. Yes, you can drive. Once you're old enough to drive and get a license, you can drive. You have mobility options, mobility choice, and you can exist in that environment. And kids, as young as they're able to navigate on the city streets, they're encouraged to do so. By the time they're 11 years old, they have passed some sort of a certificate program within the school system, typically, that has demonstrated that they know how to get around, they know the rules of the road, and they know how to navigate the safe and inviting infrastructure that's out there. And the reason why I bring this up in such elaboration is because when we have an environment like that, it has a profound impact on the kids' ability to understand the community they live in. And then we can compare that to how kids that are chauffeured around in cars have no idea about the community they live in. Talk a little bit about that work, and it's just, to me, it's always fascinating to hear about that, because it really is astounding how stunted that awareness of the community is from children who don't have a child-friendly city to be able to get around in.
Absolutely. And often you find kids now don't know how to use a map because they've only, been using GPS systems, or maybe they're not getting around. We have to come back to this photo because there's a fabulous story behind that photo. But in answer to your question about child-friendly cities, so when you use the UNICEF child-friendly cities approach, you really start by doing what's called a situation analysis, which means, what is the situation of young people in your community? What matters most to them? And so really it was a process of narrowing down. So we started with something like 120 different indicators we could measure youth well-being on. We kept narrowing it in, and the young people actually helped narrow it in. And then we did outreach to 900 children and youth to really find out what was working for them in the community and what was problematic. And so, while the beginning of Growing Up Boulder's work centered a lot around the built environment, not all of the work in terms of what were priorities for young people came up around that. So, for instance, in-person bullying was a real problem that our young people are talking about, as well as online. But also using public spaces and feeling welcome in public spaces was number 2. So it gets at all these different aspects of what it means to be a child in our community today.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we've lingered on this photo because it made you very, very excited as I pulled it up.
Yeah.
So walk us through this and describe it for the listening only audience too.
Sure. Okay, so what we're looking at is a picture of a teenager who is presenting her vision of her ideal downtown civic area. And when I referred to the civic area before, this is a project we did 11 years earlier on the other end of the civic area. So it's, these things are very long-term projects. So this was a photo from 11 years ago, and she's using different found objects to create her vision. And so they're very colorful. You've got different foam blocks, you have silk flowers, you have plastic animals, and cellophane. And this concept is actually developed by an urban planner out of California named James Rojas. And this is James's Place It activity, which we have used countless times in terms of eliciting from all ages their vision of what they want to build. Now, the reason I smiled so much is if you look through the photos, John, you'll find another photo that says Gabby Adult. So this young lady is now in her mid-20s, and I am working with her now as she is a young adult. She is mentoring the next generation of young women back at her same high school where I worked with her on the other side of the civic area project. So to me, this shows the power of this work. She and her friend Claudia, so Gabby on the left there is the same person who was in that last photo, and Claudia's on the right. They are now leaders in the community, giving back to their community after having experienced what civic engagement can be like when they were the same age as these young people. So it's really a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, yeah. And it's amazing to me too. And yes, James Rojas, that Place It program, amazing what you can get when you engage the children to be able to like think about, okay, describe it. Because if you have them if you have them draw out what their journey is like to get to school, if they're driven versus if they walk or ride a bike, it's a huge difference in terms of the amount of color or no color and what's missed in that. There's just so much richness that takes place for the children if they're able to walk or bike to school. But if you give them that ability to say, okay, well, design your perfect area, and you have lots of this colorful stuff like in James's kit, it's really, really cool to see what they come up with.
It's so exciting. And one thing James always says, and I've observed too, not once in all the times I've used it have kids or adults for that matter ever built a parking lot, right? Like that's not what people want to spend their time looking at, being a part of. And so I think that's telling. Kids are always actually building nature, water, playful spaces and colorful spaces.
Yeah. Now, what do you say to the folks that say, Mara, no, we can't take these kids that seriously? I mean, they're always on their phones, they're always on their devices. They can't possibly have any ideas that serious adults and city planners need to be taking into consideration. What's your response to that criticism?
Yeah. What I would do is I would invite them into one of our share out events where the kids who have spent often a whole semester investigating a topic, really delving into it, have a dialogue. And I have heard multiple planners, department directors, people in all sorts of different fields come out of those classrooms being so shocked and saying, we need to do more of this. That's actually how Growing Up Boulder expanded at the beginning. Was we would just invite in adults from different places to have a dialogue with the kids. Well, so many different city departments saw the benefit that they were willing to put their money where their mouth was and pay for it because they saw the benefits.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of the groups, 70%, I think, of the groups, of the children that you're working with are coming from, households that are, stressed from an economic status perspective. So, no, this isn't just wealthy Boulder and privileged children. Talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And that really is key. And we work with kids who identify as children of color, who have lower incomes, some young people who've been unhoused, LGBTQ populations, really just all of the different kids who live in our community. And that's why I often say that many of the pieces of our approach can work anywhere, because it really starts by creating relationships between ourselves and often a community partner. So we work with a lot of nonprofits in town who really know their communities because they're from the community. And what we will do is we will co-create our engagements with them to find out what works and what is reciprocal so that your community is benefiting from this. And it's not just us coming in and extracting what we need. That is why we were able to reach 1,400 children and families and service providers for Child Friendly Cities Initiative. As we said to our community partners, what do you need to make it successful for us to hear from your young people and your parents? And the answer was, that means giving them stipends for their time. That means feeding people, offering childcare, offering interpretation, letting us do storytelling, not just using written surveys. And it was incredibly successful. So it takes a lot more time. It does take more effort and sometimes more money, but the feedback we get is so rich. To me, it's completely worth it.
Yeah. And we're looking at an image on screen now of kids huddled around a diagram, a map, something that you might see at a typical city open house event, and diving in and talking about this. Elaborate a little bit more and describe this experience, because I can imagine this is just so cool to see some of the light bulbs go off within some of these minds and going, oh yeah, oh, what would be fun is if we had this over here.
Absolutely. So whenever we do a project, we think about how to make it relevant for the group we're working with. And so it's funny, the civic area is going to be a thread that I tie throughout this whole talk because it's so vast and we've worked on so many aspects of it. So these kids were looking at a diagram of what the landscape architects are proposing for the space. Now, we had been working with the same group of kids several times, so it wasn't like we just went in, gave them all the information, expected them to know what to do. Although if it's facilitated right, you can get some input. But for this, they had already done previous group classes where they had brainstormed, like, what would we need down in that space that currently 0% of those young people are using because they don't feel safe there. And this is right next to their high school, and none of the kids are going. So what would we need to change to make that a place you would hang out? And so this is them looking at that, seeing if it reflects what they had recommended. What's exciting is starting in January, we're going to be working with this same group. Some of the kids have graduated, but some are continuing from previous years. The previous year's kids are going to explain the project to their peers. So it's peer-to-peer learning. And then they're going to create mood boards of really thinking about what do they want the feel of that area to be like. And then they're going to interact with the architects who are working on the mood and naming and identity of the space. So again, it continues on, but we want to make it understandable to whichever group of kids we're working with at a given time.
I love it. I love it. That is so cool. When you look at, and let's pull up this board here, because this is taking a look at North Boulder Park and some of the typical types of boards that you'd anticipate seeing out in an open house event that the city planners are putting together. This happens to be out in the outdoors, which is kind of cool too.
Yeah, so this is great. This was a project we did this year where we tried a slightly different approach. We hired 2 teenagers to work with us to be teen consultants. And so really, we provided the scaffolding as Growing Up Boulder and our city colleagues around, here's the project, here's what we want the outcomes to be and what we're asking about. And you tell us what is the best way to ask your peers about this information, and who are those peers, and how do you even communicate to get them to come? So these 2 consultants were fantastic. And these, as you said, are visual preference surveys where the kids had sticky dots and they could choose what they most appreciated. Now, this is an example of, for these 2 young people who are standing in the photo, they were only participating for 45 minutes on this one day. So we needed to create something that they could just understand quickly and participate in. But of course, we were doing it in the park that they were trying to design. And of course, the teens who are the consultants knew how to get their peers there. So they have a WhatsApp group dedicated to that park because teens use it so much. So they had already created that. They sent info out through the WhatsApp group. They offered pizza, volleyball, all the things they knew would make kids come and volunteer service credit. And 40 kids showed up.
Yeah. Hey, there's an example of using some technology for good. So
Absolutely.
It's not all bad.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. What haven't we talked about that you would like to elaborate with a little bit before we say goodbye here today?
Yeah. One of the photos before that you showed of the two little boys pointing to a map, that is Boulder's child-friendly city map that Growing Up Boulder designed in 2019. We have printed 70,000 copies of that map, and it has been a smash hit. Kids use this map. We send it home free with every kid right before summer vacation. And the kids will put that map up in their home and say, I want to go to these different places. And so what it does is it's sort of a map that embodies all of the values around, active transit, nature, free and low cost activities. It's a bilingual map with lots of visuals. And so we're super proud of that map. And in fact, we just created a course so that other communities can take it to learn how to make their own child-friendly city map. So just wanted to share that because it's kind of unique.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Now, since we've been talking about technology, obviously printed maps, some of the information gets old. Is there an online version or is there an electronic app sort of version that where things could be added and updated? Like if a future destination is no longer a kid-friendly destination.
Yes to all of the above. So we do it in a few ways. There is a virtual one that it has a QR code on our map, so you can either go to our website and find the virtual version, or you can, if you have the printed one, you can see the virtual version as well. The other thing is we print this map yearly. So every year we update it and we either take things off or add new items. So we try and keep it as current as we can.
Fantastic. Is this the map I've zeroed in
Yes,
on?
you found it.
Fantastic.
That is the map. And that map was created with 800 children and families, 52% of whom were from underrepresented backgrounds. So that shows their chosen child-friendly locations. They're the ones who selected those, not us necessarily.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now all we need to do is work on the built environment so that more kids can get to these child-friendly destinations under their own power. Talk a little bit about how you and your organization is helping to encourage the city to do just that, so that we can have more kids that can actually get to meaningful destinations under their own power.
Absolutely. So there are so many different ways we're working on it. There are a lot of transportation projects we've been a part of. So we worked with families living in manufactured home communities and affordable housing who have to cross a super busy street to get to many places. And so we worked with them to center their voices in the redesign of two different routes that they use, very, very busy streets. So and those are going to have changes coming soon that will be more bike and pedestrian friendly. But the other piece is our community just tried its first community assembly, which if people don't know what that is, I recommend you look it up. It's a really interesting democratic way of working where you have the same group of community members come together over, say, 6 months, one time for a whole day per month. They're paid for their time and they're fed. And they have discussions about a topic. And the discussion our community had was about 15-minute neighborhoods. And part of Growing Up Boulder's job was helping make sure that there were young people who were participating. So thanks to our work and our city's work, there were several kids who were 16, 17, 18 who were part of that community-wide dialogue going into what will make 15-minute neighborhoods. So that should be pretty impactful for our community.
Yeah. And I can already hear some of the haters going, 15 minutes, that's a conspiracy. No, folks, it's not a conspiracy. I did want to highlight this PDF of an event that took place. Talk a little bit about this.
That actually was the North Boulder Park event. So the one that you saw the photo of, earlier on. And this was the flyer created by the kids for kids, which again, I love. Like if I had been planning this, I wouldn't have known to have spike ball and volleyball provided there. They knew what was going to work for their community. And they were absolutely right because the kids came.
Imagine that. Just ask the kids.
I know. Yeah, they can probably, and they also, I just have to say this other thing. I have seen when you have intergenerational dialogue, like in person, though, it's really important to do it in person, not through documents. People with fixed ideas, whether it's the kids or the adults, start to loosen and start to change a little bit. This is a really important part of democracy, to have young people be part of that conversation. And people leave, they're actually uplifted. So even if it was different from how you were thinking, you're on usually better behavior. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine that, as part of that, the changing of the mindset, that you have come across just a large number of parents that have just been blown away by this interaction and how much their children could actually contribute.
Absolutely. I mean, I know kids who ended up writing their college essays about the impact this has made on them to be able to shift something in their community or to contribute. And then what's also really fun, because we're a small enough community, sometimes I'll have kids who have participated in 4 projects, one in preschool, one in elementary school, middle, and high school. And so it actually creates this lifelong engagement, and the parents are pretty moved by that.
It occurs to me, I grew up on a ranch in Northern California, and I was part of 4-H as a little tyke, and then all the way up until high school, and then shifted over into FFA, Future Farmers of America. And it also occurs to me that when I look back at my childhood, that was a great opportunity for me to develop leadership skills and being able to communicate with others and peers. And I think I served on the board of my 4-H club, and so I understood what a sergeant of arms did and that sort of a thing. It seems like this is also a wonderful opportunity for kids to learn some of these skills, social skills, and then also leadership skills.
Well, it's huge because, and one of the things we try and do is we try and offer ways for every kid to be successful. And as I really believe that that's possible. And the way we do that is, maybe some kids are less verbal and or more shy. And so maybe they do something based around art and they can share their art. Maybe it's music, maybe it's acting, maybe it's getting up and presenting to city council. They all have opportunities to be leaders. And another wonderful story is that one of the first young people we worked with at Growing Up Boulder, Edgar Chavarria, when he was 10, he had never spoken before, but the center that Growing Up Boulder was based out of asked him for his input, and he shared at a public meeting. He has now been our board chair this past year. He's in his mid-20s. He works in community engagement for the city of Boulder, and he is utilizing those skills that he learned. And he's the first in his family to go to college. English was not his first language, but he knew that people cared and that he mattered. And so he's continued that for his own life.
I love it. That is so cool. And what a great way to bring this conversation to a close. Mara, this has been such a joy and pleasure having you on the Active Towns podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It was really a pleasure.
Hey, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Mara. And if you did, please, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, I'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on that subscription button down below and be sure to ring that notifications. And again, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Again, super easy to do. Again, that join button right here on YouTube. YouTube super thanks, as well as head on over to activetowns.org. Click on that support tab at the top of the page. And again, there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Again, patrons do get early and ad-free access to all this video content, but you can also buy me a coffee or make a donation to the nonprofit. Hey, every little bit helps and is very much appreciated. Well, until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, happiness, and aloha. Cheers. And I just want to also say thank you all so much to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel financially via YouTube Super Thanks, YouTube memberships, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, and making donations to the nonprofit. Again, I simply could not produce this content without your support. Thank you all so very much.